and you have an opportunity to visit that museum, I think you won't be disappointed. It's a wonderful building, and it really underscored the importance of having Phil join us here as a key professor this year, and continues the legacy. There's a key connection too, because Gary was a key professor, and I would pass that legacy on to Phil, who's now a key professor. This sort of the key club here. So let's welcome Phil Freelon.
Thank you, Brian. I also like to thank David Cronner, the dean, who wanted to be here but has a meeting with the provost, so we take precedent. I particularly want to thank Brian for scheduling it at this time frame. We've got a full house, and I think that has something to do with the studio and the timing, so thank you all for coming. I also want to thank the school for this terrific honor of being named the key distinguished professor. When I looked at the list of folks who served in this position before, it was very humbling, and so it really is a high honor, particularly with my friend Barry Bowden, also serving in that capacity some years ago. And I look forward to working with the students who will be continuing, and in other weeks I'll be back to critique and hopefully visit some of our projects in Washington. A few of those we'll talk about today. Before we look at the work, though, I wanted to say just a few words about our practice, how we're organized, how we work. We're about 45 or 50 people now. We've been as high as 70, and of course, with the recession over the past few years, like other firms, we've had to adjust our staff to meet the work. But it's always in a studio environment, and it's very collaborative. And so I tell you from the start that these projects are not singular accomplishments. There isn't any one author. I certainly take pride in overseeing much of it and giving it direction. I want to give credit to people much like you, the young students on up through the most experienced professionals in our office, working together in collaboration. And one of the tenets that we adhere to in our firm, one of our founding principles, is that we believe that when it's appropriate, architectural projects ought to be driven by an idea. It's not good enough simply to have a beautiful building that's well detailed, but there ought to be some meaning behind it, particularly when the project is for an institution or an organization that has a vision and mission that's very specific and hopefully very powerful. So we believe that buildings, again, when it's appropriate, should help to convey that vision and mission. And for us, it starts with an idea. And so what do we mean by that? What's an idea? Well, the standard dictionary has a very academic definition of this. I would like to say that an idea really begins with a thought. And a thought isn't doing any good really while it's in your head. That's something very personal. It's an idea that needs some way of coming out. But it starts with a thought, these ideas. And so from there, that thought has to be expressed in some way. And it could be simply communicating that to another person. But when that begins to happen, very often there's action that's taken. And once 2 or 3 people share that idea or the thought, there's an expression, and the action could be building a model, it could be picking up a guitar and expressing that through music, or it could be getting into 3D modeling or whatever. But that action quite often comes back around to thought again, and that's when the collaboration process really takes off. And so it's not a singular person or thing, but if a strong idea is taking hold, that can really drive the project to higher heights. If it's clear, if it's focused. And so for me, and I'll go back to almost the beginning where my favorite quote about this is from Charles Mingus, the famous jazz musician, who said, "Making the simple complicated is commonplace, but making complicated simple, that's simply awesome. That's really creativity." And so this notion of zeroing in on the core idea and simplifying it is really important. Marcel Boyer says, "I try always to find the last solution, the simplest way." Charles Eames put it this way: I think of myself officially as an architect, but I can't help but look at problems around us as problems of structure. And structure is architecture. Again, back to the simplicity. Very early on in our firm, we were 3 or 4 people. One of our early projects was to go into an elementary school. This elementary school was the very youngest children, kindergarten to 3rd grade. This was their media center. It's a small school in rural North Carolina. We're building our practice. Small renovation projects were quite often where you start. And for us, each project is an important opportunity to do something special. And as we moved into museums later on, the ideas that really began to drive our thinking started in smaller projects like this. And it's talking with the users, engaging the client. They're part of the team. It's part of the collaboration I've been talking about. And so we interviewed our clients, the kindergartners. Their favorite story was the runaway bunny. And so we decided, let's make this media center start to sing, start to speak about what it is, even before they get there. So this opening book is the doorway into that very simple renovation. Now, the client didn't ask for this. It wasn't any extra fee. Having ideas doesn't cost anymore. But we engaged that client. Once you're inside the renovated media center library, you see the others facing book cover. And we could have picked the circulation desk out of the catalog. We designed the desk with their second favorite story, Winnie the Pooh. The idea, huge pencil on top. And we ended up with happy clients because they were engaged in the idea that they had. We were able to implement that in a powerful way. So it doesn't take a lot of extra money. It just takes care and thought to take that idea and try to. Let's fast forward a decade or two. We're working right now in Atlanta, Georgia, on the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. And the process here is something, when you get into the profession, you'll experience for sure. It has to do with budgets, it has to do with strengths that come along, and competitions. This is an award-winning or competition-winning entry. And the idea here, we're talking about civil and human rights. In our research, we found these photographs, and some of them are very familiar. It's the linking of arms, interlinking of arms, showing unity, and strength in numbers, and cross-cultural collaborations. And so, on my way to the interview, I flew down to Atlanta, and I opened up the Wall Street Journal. There were linked arms. I told me right away I've got to be running the right idea. And over the years, I've been seeing this repeated over and over again, this very strong image of people who are coming together, possibly disparate ideas and in conflict, but agreeing to come together. And so our competition entry was a building that was interlinking arms with a green roof. And this was a competition in which Norman Foster and Bill Scafidio and others had entered. We were selected primarily on the strength of this idea. And when the project finally got started, the building got small. And so the atrium in the center went away as the arms came together. So quite often ideas evolve, particularly in competitions. It's very seldom that the pure idea survives through to construction. And that was the case here. As the building became small, we thought it got even more powerful. With that collaboration space, the atrium became part of the inside of the building, and the armor became even more expressive. And so this design was carried through to design development and into the working drawings when it stopped for a year because of funding. And the building downsized it again. And I'll remind you, you'll see this movie in your own lives over and over. And not to approach it as a disaster or as a problem, but it's an opportunity to make the building better, to evolve the building into something else. And so we took the idea and just flipped it a little bit. We talked about space for action. The building is now half the size of the original. How can you then just make the arms smaller, or make them somehow hands instead, or what do you do? And so rather than trying to twist and turn that idea and force fit it, we evolved it into a space for action and a little less literal interpretation of that interlocking idea. And so the building having a 20-foot fall from one end to the other, with on-grade entrances at both ends, we needed some verticality with a smaller area. And so this concept evolved into what we see here. The building now has got some lift to it. It's a more subtle gesture with regard to arms. We think no less powerful. Materiality, very important. We looked at terracotta, we looked at wood, we looked at other materials, glass, settled on a material that's a phenolic resin. Colorality, how to keep the tonality, and making reference to different aspects of the cultures coming together, and speaking to different group rights. Trying to express that in facade. So this building is now under construction in Atlanta. Quite different from the original competition. It's smaller. We think the evolution in thinking still comes through, possibly in more powerful way. And this flowing shape actually helps with regard to the exhibits and flowing through the space, where movement is not perpendicular at right angles, but it's moving, flowing along the edges, and really does help the flow of the exhibit. This is looking at the lobby out plaza area. I won't go into detail on the plans. Just give you a sense of how those interior spaces are going to shape up. Now, in Charlotte, North Carolina, we were in competition with one of my old friends, one of Garrett's as well, Harvey Gant. And if that name sounds familiar, he was the mayor of Charlotte for years and ran for Senate against Jesse Helms some years ago. And then he's an architect. He's a very good friend. Well, this is his hometown, and we were competing for what was called at the time the African American Cultural Center. We got the project, which made him angry, and they named the building after him, so it was a win-win. A little bit of background. The site is quite interesting and challenging. Here's the central business district of Charlotte. You've got the Panthers Arena, NFL football, the NBA arena is here, the Civic Center is here, and there's a cultural district that has developed in this area. And we felt that with the myriad of site possibilities, our client was asked to choose, and we wanted to help them with that choice, because there were some very nice sites that were open, had better flow, better access. We felt it was important to be in the center of that new cultural district that was emerging. A bit of history. This history is shared with lots of cities in the north and the south. You see this freeway here? That was put in the 60s, early 70s. And this green area represents the traditional African American neighborhood. In many of our cities and towns, there's a line, quite often it's with railroad tracks. The black community, thick in the south, segregated south, was on one side, and the majority community was on the other side. And so what happened over time, one thing that's good was desegregation. There was no longer a need to have separate but equal facilities. The bad thing is, oftentimes urban renewal, highways and so forth, blasted right through the old communities and left them. This takes over time. So this is our site. I'll talk more about that in a minute. That context of the cultural core of the city is here. In this with the Marigold Museum here, Shotgun Savetti, the Mint Museum. There is a mega block where Wells Fargo has built this enormous tower, multi-use, mixed use there, retail, hotel, and so on, residences, hotel. There's also a NASCAR museum close by, and convention center. Well, the site is this sliver of land. It's 55 feet by 400 feet. It's the access ramps for the 10 levels of parking below this mega block. And remember, there are other sites that, certainly from a formal standpoint and configuration, is much better. And our clients were very leery of folks saying, "I'm going to take this site, it's a beautiful site." It seemed like crumbs off the table to our clients. They were angry. We asked for a weekend to look at ideas for what we could do with this. We wanted to convince them that there was value in being in this location, even though it's a challenging site. And as architects, we love challenges. We love difficult problems and so on. And this one was one of the most difficult I've been involved in. Here's that tower, mega block. There's the 10 stories of parking. At the end of our site, there's a truck ramp. And above the truck ramp is a car ramp that enters into the center of that site. And so that's our building context. Back to the district. This is a standalone neighborhood. They had their own hotel, movie theater, hospital, etc. Not unusual for the South. And there's no remnants of this anywhere anymore. All we know through our research is finding books and photographs of what used to be there. As the city grew to the south, it's now part of that urban mix that we showed. Now in our research, we found this school called the Myers School, pretty close to where our site is. And it's nicknamed the Jacob's Ladder School because during graduations and events, people would come out onto the balconies, onto the stairway, and take pictures of those groups. And we felt that this was pointed. We extrapolated a bit and said, well, this is really showing that the power of education, the importance of education in the African American community is the path toward ascension in this country. Education is the key. So we wanted to find a way to commemorate this community, even though it was no longer there. How can we, through this building, harken back to those days of the Brooklyn community, it was called, in downtown Charlotte. And so our Part T in elevation is an elevated building, 2 ramps below, Jacob's ladder, stairs and escalators to get you to the main floor. And then a pattern that is referencing back to quilting and African textile patterns as a nod back to the community's heritage and culture. So what do you do with a site that's 55 by 400? Well, look, here's the car ramp right in the middle of the site. Here's the truck ramp at the end. So what we did was we entered the fence. Here's a small vestibule, and escalators up, and then a stair up. And then on the back side, this is a party wall where there's going to be development on this site eventually. So there are no windows there. It's a long blank walls. What do? You put the toilets, the elevators, mechanical, etc. on that back wall. And then when you arrive at the top of the escalators, at the top of the stairs, you can take advantage of that space in between. Right now, those round tables are just showing a banquet configuration, but most of the time it's a lobby. And there's an open stair and atriums that continue to Jacob's ladder up through the building. Here's a multi-purpose room, classrooms, and because you enter at the ends of this long site and you wind up at the middle, when you get to the upper floors, you're already, you don't need corridors to get to the main spaces. So your galleries can take the full depth, plus about 4 feet of cantilever. And the aspect ratio of these rooms are quite right. In there, you wouldn't know that you're in a long skinny building. So arriving in the center, using that atrium, as the circulation allows us to eliminate corridors to the main spaces. That's the third level. In the fourth level, we have administrative offices, more classroom space, an outdoor terrace, and exhibit prep. And all the while, you're lining up the utilities and elevator and mechanicals on the back wall. And because we're right near the freeway, it's a billboard, it's an entry point into the city. And our building, which is a faraway site that no one could figure out what to do with, it was very upset. We turned it into positive. It's an AI Design Award winner. Mario Gorka's project, here's the mega tower. It's the entry point in through the central business district. And the facade is a high-tech rain screen, perforated metal, because most of your gallery spaces do not need or want light. So we concentrated the glass on the atrium and the strip of offices at the top. There's your deck, And it's hard to see, but there's the car entrance. And the car ramps go down and turn right and down. So we're able to ensure that vehicular access point and create this network of margins and glass to simulate that quilting to 2 subtle different shades of brown for the facade. And looking back up the street toward the tower, this is a commissioned artwork right in front of the truck ramps. So the trucks enter, you can't see them when you're walking along the street. There's the vehicular access cars. And as you turn, and this is the main entrance that went in, as you turn and look toward the back, we simply continue the channels and inexpensive exterior lights to create a light sculpture on the back side. And there are some very expensive condos looking onto this site. And one of them is owned by an architect friend of mine who was bugging me the whole time. You better make this attractive design. And when the building was finished, he called and said, good job. Gets to the top of the escalators, is that central lobby. Big ladder continues up through the atrium. And now, this is the entry to one of the galleries. So far, it's right off the main space and views back towards the south of town. And here, in one of the 2 main galleries, you can see that you can't tell that you're in this long, narrow building. The portions are purple. And then at the top, you can't put glass back or refuse. This is receiving a lot of attention from folks who are renting this space for functions and weddings and so forth. It's a revenue generator for the center. So, this is just another manifestation of taking an idea and turning the building into more than just a pretty graphic, but something that has meaning and is relevant to its place. Let's talk about Washington. We've got 4 projects in the nation's capital. This is just to orient you. This is the Monumental Floor, Capitol here, Lincoln Memorial here, the National Mall, the Reflecting Pond, and the White House. This orients you to our nation's capital, the font plan. You can see spreading out in all directions, and Anacostia River, Tidal Basin, and so on. The first project I'm going to show you is in the Anacostia neighborhood of Washington, D.C., in the southeast. It's a traditional African-American neighborhood. We were hired to design 2 libraries for the DC library system, and this is one. And when you look at Figure Ground, Good Hope Road is here, and you can see from the pattern that this is a retail street. their business along here, but then it evolves and transitions into residential pattern. And our site is right at the hinge point between those two. It's quite a nice site. There was a library on this site that closed down, was outdated, wasn't really working for the community. And with the 20,000 square foot building for the midst, other structures that are residential and much smaller, we felt that it was important to break the scale down to something smaller, rather than have one block of a building. So the idea here was to create pavilions for various functions in the library, and then have one large room for the reading room. Some sketches, and yes, we still draw by hand, and we use the computer, but the hand sketches are usually the part T. And the proof we felt was going to be very important. We had very little control of the orientation of the building and controlling solar gain. So the west was going to be exposed. We wanted to turn the roof down and protect the library and the books from the direct sun. The pavilions would sit on the plinth. Another site that slopes about 20 feet from one end to the next, and long way entry to both ends. So this roof structure sits down over the pavilions that house the children's reading area, young adults, periodicals, and administration are the main four pavilions in this party. One important aspect of the site, there were several, let me just go through them. This is where the temporary library was in operation. One of our charges was to maintain that temporary library throughout construction. And so they would move all of us. So we couldn't build on this portion of the site. There were two large legacy hardwood trees here. We had to work around that. We knew that access would come off this axis here in part. So the constraints really dictated the form of the building and where it would fit. In the north, pointing upward, we've got a very large exposure to the west. Had to deal with it. There was no way around that. And so the last thing we put in place was this rain reclamation area, runoff, and an opportunity to teach about sustainability on sites. There are plaques and children walk through and learn about that. That was the last thing we put in. The building is slipped in between those large trees. I think the base you can see here express themselves in the plan. It's parallel there. So on the upper side of the site, higher end, you come in, there's what we call the main street, all the way through the building on one side. Smaller circulation space here. It's all open. That's your reading room and your stacks. And these pavilions are all to the side. Now, just below this area on the lower level, we have access from the neighborhood side, remember the site plan. We have community room and other functions that can be accessed after hours while keeping the public space secure. So the community can use that. Just a few details about controlling that western side. We're using perforated metal that's corrugated. They're very inexpensive, common materials. And we studied the perforation pattern, the frequency, how open it was, certain exposures to let in the light that we wanted, but the control, keeping it from being too harsh and having too much glare and heat. So the building is a green building. It has a green roof, and the roof is green. Here's the roof. This is the western side. The roof turns down. The perforations control the sun. Now, with such a long, low building, we also felt that the vertical element was important. And so we put in this monolithic tower that lights at night as a beacon for the neighborhood. There's a plaza out front. See a little better here. Here's one of the pavilions coming out. We're very common materials and expensive materials. Stepping in, the children's area is right up front. That's in the important element of the community. And these libraries, I remember years ago, 10 years ago, let's say, or 15, when the internet was coming on strong, people were thinking, why would you need libraries? You can always go to the internet and get what you need. And what we're finding now, with the millennium, is that it's just the opposite. Libraries are even more. They become community centers. They become places where people who don't have computers can come and get those resources. And so bigger libraries are more vibrant than ever. A few interior shots and the intersection of the turn down route on the west, one of the pavilions, how those come together. Here's a detailed western elevation. Now, just low enough with the horizon line, it's cut off. Capitol Light is still coming through. So the ambiance inside is very nice. You still get views out. That light is controlled. There are sustainable aspects of the site. I won't go into fine detail about that. The building is LEED Gold certified. Very, very sustainable. Including that site feature I spoke about earlier. Right there. Raised floor system, lighting controls, plumbing fixtures that save water, recycling locations. Just a myriad of low DOC volatile organic compounds, things like adhesives and paint. All right, so that's Anacostia, southeast, excuse me. If you go to the opposite end of the city, northwest, this is the Tenley Friendship neighborhood. Totally different configuration of residents. It's right near American University. It's in an affluent area. Exact same program. Exact same program. A totally different building, as you see. We started looking at the context of the grid as it moves north from the Font Plan. There's still the diagonals. Our site is really at a convergence of many different things. This is a use type diagram where we're seeing commercial and church and schools, the color code. So this is looking at the uses. Residential, obviously, is light green, greenish yellow. You look at the green space, the urban fabric. There's access to those as well. And then here, we've got the transportation diagram. It's on one of the T stops. There are buses, that's very good. And the local character of the buildings, getting to take cues from this funky geometry that's coming in and really focus on our intersection. So these were some of the drivers for the idea of this library. So we looked at all those vectors from various street grids, from all the way back to the Font, way to the south, and east, to the more diagonal grid, and very tight footprint, close to staying site. We had to build almost to the edge. So we let the geometry really drive how this building is going to be laid out. And it's almost like a pinwheel scene where those vectors are taking us around and around and beginning to suggest forms in the spaces. This is the western edge, right? You want to control at the light once again. And similar to the Charlotte job, this is also a future development site. So foot windows there are going to be covered eventually. So very few, if any, windows on the west. On the east, you've got an edge to deal with pedestrians coming up this way along Wisconsin Avenue, Altamar. There's a slightly less traffic street, more residential in nature. We're looking at atrium and the reading area, stacking this first, the green roof again, atrium. And we decided to put the support spaces along this edge, administrative, book sorting, and that sort of thing. The plan's a bit washed out, so I won't spend a lot of time on these. We're entering here, the grand staircase. You can see from the drawing that these are smaller support spaces, toilets, etc., and then the stacks on the other side of the atrium. On the upper level, the same kind of configuration. This time, the public meeting space is on the second floor. This is looking at the corner of Wisconsin and Albemarle. And, to control the light in this particular situation, we use fins. And fins, yes, they block the light, but they're also perforated. And so you can see through from the outside, more importantly from the inside, back out, as we control the light along the east, carry that heat around to the side. Lifting the building, creating visual transparency at that first level is an important element. The suburban setting is opposed to more suburban setting there in Wisconsin. Here's the atrium, bringing light down through. This side has got the reading areas, the sport areas, and the lower level. Here you can see the perforations, allowing just the right amount of light to come in, keeping the ceiling very clean. You don't see any sprinkler heads, you don't see lights, you don't see conduit. These are very deliberate decisions on placing those things where they don't become intrusive as you view the space. And closing the seal and letting that through the grid. And from Wisconsin, looking back the other way. So as you come along, something tells you that this is the entrance. That first piece inviting you in, goes through the corner of the dome. We included some of the history of this neighborhood in a display here along that long beach. So some of the architecture of the neighborhood streets is displayed there. This project, well, both of the Pentecostal and Tenley, two libraries were local AIA Design Award winners and published records, architecture record and architecture. I have to tell you, these buildings don't happen just because we're creative and trying to implement ideas. We have a great client. Jenny Cooper is the head librarian. She decided that she wanted the best architects from around the country to come and work in D.C. Our firm is in North Carolina. We've lots of architects in D.C. We've done two, and one of the architect in the group that she hired, she invited that to do a third project. We'll see in a minute. Okay, so that was Anacostia. Here's Tenley. We draw a line between the two, almost right in the middle of those, and in the center of D.C. The third library I'm going to show you. This is the central branch of the system, Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library. And it's East Vander Road's only project in Washington and the very last commission overall. And so I won't say that it's one of his best works, but it's an excellent building. It's one that deserves attention and deserves to be restored and to be respected. I use the analogy of, classics like Shakespeare and Romeo and Juliet. In the 60s, Leonard Bernstein wrote West Side Story, same story, respecting the classics and turning it into a more contemporary story. Even today, Romeo and Juliet is being revived on Broadway. See it again. So this is an important building. We were asked to see how we can bring it up to current standards for library design. It's a horrible building. As libraries have evolved, this structure is not working for the library system, even though the bones of it are very nice. And so we were asked to look at this. Here's your National Mall on here. So we're just north of that in what's called the Chinatown area. National Portrait Gallery is right across the way. And so it's a very vibrant, this is actually the Rising Center, sorry. But there's a lot going on here, and we're right in the middle of it. Now, there are challenges. There are code deficiencies, accessibility needs to be brought up to speed. The deferred maintenance is just incredible. Aging systems, energy performance. The building's a sieve. It's single pane glass. Caulking nonsense failed. And one of the challenges is the iconic architecture. That's also one of the advantages of iconic architecture. Decent signature, exterior high beams on the facade. So we were asked by the library system, what can be done? They couldn't imagine this building being what they wanted, to knock your socks off library, central branch of the nation's capital. They asked us to prove to them that this could be done. So this isn't a design, it's a concept. In fact, there is a RFP, a request for proposals, and a competition to actually do the architectural work. We feel like we're in good shape to have to do planning. These are some of the challenges. The systems that are eroding, the caulking, the infiltration of water and air. The technology is just not happening. And so this is what we're dealing with. Now, this building is on the historic register, and that's not surprising. Many mid-century buildings built in the 70s are now coming around to a point where deferred maintenance has not been kept up, and they need to be restored. Some of them are being knocked over, others are being restored. What is unusual is that the first floor of this building is also on the registered interior. That's not something that's normal. But that view I showed of the inside is part of what we have to preserve. And Mises' concept was to maintain these open vistas through the space. Yes, there are elements like card catalogs, which we don't have anymore, by card catalogs. But even with those in place, you can see that there's an openness that we think is worth maintaining. And those elements, like the catalog, circulation desks, reading areas, are something that we think is good to maintain as well. Now, the building is designed as 4 stories above, 2 below, but the structure can accommodate additional height. There is a height restriction in DC, and so you can't go higher than this point here. But the actual foundations and steel can accommodate 2 additional floors with some modification. So the system wants to leverage that. Yes, we need the library, but what can we do to generate revenue, perhaps have a development opportunity that enhances the project? So we look at that. And one way to do that is to extrude Mises' building and take the same elevation and bring it up. So the building right now stops here. So one idea says just take it up to just looking from the corner of G and 9th Street. This is 10th Street and G looking back this way. There's 2 floors of addition. Not very inspiring. We believe in the Historic Properties Commission will have a say in this, but we think it's appropriate to change the architecture. It's 5 decades later, it's new construction, so to set it back, create a new architectural language that's complementary, not mimic the building. So that's what we recommend. And when we did the programming, very quick program to see what could fit, we learned that the building is actually bigger than it needs to be. So if we take a hole out of the donut right here, and create an atrium, move that, come in with vertical elements, bring light into this very deep building, we thought that would be one way to really energize this plan. So, and we know from preliminary programming studies that we can still fit all library needs in. So if you do a section cut through here, you see that the primary spaces like the auditorium, the reading room, the children's area, they can all potentially look out into an atrium and vertically be linked by a material or color that brings you to a rooftop that's activated, the last 2 floors. Whether they be residential or possibly office or commercial, make use of those roof areas as well. Early study of that atrium opening up, that vertical element. I know orange is passe, it's used too much, it's just a placeholder. But something materially or color to suggest that vertical movement through space. And even the auditorium, one like this, why not have views out into the atrium space? Yes, bring drapes across when it's necessary, but and activate those spaces with the adjacent primary activities. The same lobby area, a little bit more detail on that. Technology is important. So the product catalogs are gone, but you go up to monitor and find information. In the children's area, in all these libraries, that's very important to engage children, create areas where they can actually sit inside of the space, engage technology once again. So we showed them that you could have a vibrant, exciting rejuvenation of this nice building, including activating the ground with a cafe, seating. And this spurred the City Council and Mayor Gray to actually begin funding this project to the tune of $10 million initially. So when people were ready to walk away from the building and not go, we wanted to show them something exciting to happen there, beginning to move to the next phase. I'm going to close with our fourth project in Washington. There's the three we just talked about. And just here, to the south of our MOT library, is the site of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. This was a project, another competition, an international competition. It was run by Freelon, and Stifford. We're the lead firm, the architect of record, David Ajay is the lead design firm. We've been working for 3 years on this project. It's under construction in DC on the corner of 15th and Constitution. You see an enormous 5-acre hole in the ground. Under construction. And when I say the building is prominent and that it's a very important site, I'm not kidding. This is the site. This is Constitution Avenue, 14th Street, 15th Street, literally in the shadow of Washington Monument. The last buildable site on the mall in Washington, D.C. And when we think about the mall, this is a very orthogonal plan. Everything's lined up, the array of trees, very rectilinear. As you move into Washington Monument grounds, becomes more organic, more bucolic in nature. We're right at the pivot point. It's technically part of Washington Monument grounds. Physically, it's the end termination of the mall. With views from and to White House, Archives, the Capitol. This is the Jefferson Memorial, MLK Memorial, Lincoln, American Board, Washington Monument itself is right here. And so, very sensitive and important site. Many, many eyes on this. A few agencies. It's an incredible process to get through all of the stakeholders and all the people that have an interest in this project. And we're working our way through it. And so the building takes on the very regular geometry of its neighboring to some of the institutions along the mall. The National Museum of History. So the building's square, okay? But the site picks up on the flowing nature of that bucolic setting, organic forms of Washington Monument. The idea. What's driving this? Well, celebration is a big part of it. This is not a museum about perpetrators and victims. That's part of the story. We have to tell the truth. It's also about rejuvenation, resilience. We're looking at the porch as a welcoming expression, as a way to control, naturally control the light and views in this hot climate of the city sun. We also look at the African notions of architecture. This is called the caryoptid. It's part of the Reuben architectural tradition in West Africa. and similar in some ways to Western architecture. There's a base, a body, and a cap. This is in the classical architecture. And the capital in this case is called a corona. It's a three-tiered element, and you don't see this form hardly at all in Western architecture. But that's something we're doing. And so the landscape is part of this too, the working landscape. This is an important slide, not that important. There are nautical themes, timber, working landscape, etc. But throughout it all, this notion of celebration is important. So if you look at those issues and those ideas of celebration carried out to Corona, the porch, and the working landscape, these are some of the sketches that came out of our charrette session, David Ajay's take on these issues, and began to suggest a building that was actually a Corona. Now, watch the monument. This angle right here, at 14 degrees, 17 degrees, just remember that, because that angle, 17 degrees, is something that we're going to come back to in a minute. And also the panel size, the grid of the stones of the Washington Monument was something else we took a cue on. So there are several references back to our important neighbors. And the building itself is a three-tiered corner. This angle, the same angle as the capstone of the Washington Monument, you turned around. So it's almost like inverted pyramids stacked on one another. It's clad in bronze, not solid bronze coated panels that have a variable perforation pattern that lets in light and privileges certain views while controlling heat gain on the building. There's a monumental porch in the south welcoming you and creating a microclimate where cool breezes come across the water feature as you enter the building. Doesn't want to advance. And at the top of the one of the skylights and bring light down into the building. Now, let's talk about the Corona. There's a tradition, particularly in the South, in places like New Orleans and Charleston, of ironwork and patterning and gilding work done by African Americans, enslaved and free, that created these beautiful patterns. And so there's also this notion of creating layers where you're doing through, opening through the pattern, glass and pattern metal work. So picking up on this, with florets and different shapes that are conveyed in ornate metal work, we took that and we took a contemporary extrapolation of that to create the patterning on the Corona skin. And that patterning is variable across the building in gradations that allow more or less light in, more or less views out. Here. And so that Corona area becomes a zone for controlling the environment, protecting the galleries that are inboard, and creating atrium on the north and the west. The vertical circulation through escalators and so forth. And the most prominent views are out to the west toward Washington. So these are early models that looking at the proportion of Corona and the patterning of those openings. And that notion of porch, that's a place where you can sit, you can rest, you can celebrate. There's activity there, there's shade, there's respite. And this is our porch. It's a 240-foot freestanding. And here's the water element I talked about, and that circulating air, bringing cool breezes and creating microclimate that is quite comfortable. And there are messages in still water, running water on an angle of ease, so that there's a drain in the middle that they do need. So we felt as the building want to reach out and embrace visitors to the nation's capital. The view, Washington Monument, the over your left shoulder, looking at the building. And working through various review agencies, we have to move more than half the building below grade. So this is a relatively small footprint compared to the total program of the museum, more than half is underground. And then inside, in the Great Hall, what we're calling is as far as the timbers, green timbers, creating lighting effect, but also adjusting the gravity and the importance of the elements above. And even one level below, because the skylights closed up for the moment to use light streams down into space. They're major components of the history exhibit, Coleman part here. And then there's the space for reflection, respite. You might go through some very difficult exhibits and come here and rejuvenate your background. So this building is coming out of the ground. We're 18 months into construction, and the whole is still rising. We're getting up to grade pretty soon. And it's due to open in December of 2015. And so I'll close with that and ask if there are any questions.
Question about the basement levels of that building. How many floors are below ground in the African American Museum? How many of those floors are public floors? Number three, the B1, B2 levels of market with the big library. What are they going to do with those for use?
Everyone here has questions? I'll repeat. There's two parts to this question. How many levels below grade for this building? What's going on with this building? And then going back to the Martin Luther King Library, where there's 2 levels below grade there, what's going on there? I'll start here. There are 3 levels below, and there are public spaces there. Remember I mentioned that oftentimes gallery spaces are not controlled right anyway. You don't want windows. So the main history gallery is below grade and actually traverses vertically those 3 levels. It's a 3-story high space, starting at the lowest level coming up to grade. There's also the auditorium there. There's lots of back of house functions, support for the galleries, staff, maintenance. There's a full loading dock with 2 large bays for the cemetery. So there's quite a bit underground. That's how those spaces are used.
Will the lowest level be a public space at the lowest level?
The history gallery is 3 stories high, so that goes all the way down to the lowest level. The public will get down. Now there are areas of the basement that are not open. Now the second part of your question is about the ML King Library. There's parking below, and that would probably remain. We looked at using some of these high-tech car storage systems where they retrieve your car and move it around robotically. Where you can quadruple the capacity. They may do that. It's just not our study. But yeah, they're 2 levels below. They won't be housed in library functions. Yes.
Do you think it's appropriate for such a prominent civic building as a central library to have co-located for-profit space in it? I mean, how does it get there?
Do I think it's appropriate for?
What do you think about it? You don't have to say whether it's appropriate or not.
Okay. What do I think about the notion of combining retail or office with a public function like the library?
For non-library functions.
Well, first of all, I think it can be a good thing, and if they're discrete and separate. And so, in the instance we were showing, there would be a separate elevator core in connection to the upper floors at ML King. And so you're not commingling in that way. It's a notion that's very common. It's called mixed use, and we see that it's quite positive in some cases to have a place to eat close by, or even connected to the library. To have residents that control. I'm not saying you go through the library to get to these things, but to have them in the same building, I think is fine. I don't see any problem with that. Yes.
And so I was actually going to ask about kind of the idea towards design and kind of trying to adapt it towards specific communities. And this is more geared towards the Tenley and the Anacostia libraries, just because there are two very distinct communities, and a lot of the information that you displayed here kind of dealt a little bit more with how to fit the building within the site and the parameters of that. But I wanted to see if there was any input as to whether or not there are also contributions of, say, like the makeup of the community and trying to kind of adapt that to make it a safer hub.
Yes, and hope everybody heard that the question was about the two libraries, the fact that they're in different communities that possibly different needs and aspirations. How do you deal with that, or how do you address that? And yes, I mentioned the program as far as what's in the building is concerned, identical, but how it's configured and how the architect was treated is quite different. Some of that is driven by the issue you just mentioned. For instance, at Anacostia, we felt that beacon piece, the column that comes up, was an important signal, more so for Anacostia than Tenley. Because they're in a lower area and the building is sloping down, it's quite a low profile. And it has become, residents are very excited about the beacon community center aspect of that building. So that's one case where we have a vertical element in Anacostia that's not in Tenley. And also Tenley is on a corner that's very urban. There's retail around it. So we wanted to build right to the edge, plus we needed the space. So that's a response to the specific neighborhood. In Anacostia, the building's pushed back and created a plaza. It's more of a suburban approach where that outdoor area, I think, is more fitting to that community than trying to put something like that in the location that we see at Tenley. Just two examples. Yes.
You've shown a beautiful manipulation of the architectural form, as well as a very acute understanding of the programmatic needs of the communities that you've worked with. Could you speak briefly about how to bring the two together, and for all of us as students, what to look at as we are studying to do both in our careers?
Very good question. I think one of the keys to bringing, the formal aspects, what does the building look like? How does it speak to you architecturally? And then what does the community need? A key in that is engaging the community. And I didn't talk much about this, but it's very important in all of our work. We get out and do what we call stakeholder meetings. And so when we're commissioned, we don't go away for 6 months and come back with the design only talking with the users or the administrators of the building. We bring early ideas to meetings like this and engage citizens who have the vested interest as well. And both in Anacostia and Tenley, there were upwards of 6 or 7 meetings with the community as the design was developed. And there were adjustments that were made based on what we were hearing. So that's a very important piece. Even the National Museum, we went across the country in different major metropolitan areas and some not so major, asking questions. What do people want in this museum? What do they think it should be? And so that reaching out and getting it directly from those residents is really important, and we've done that. I've got another lecture that talks about public engagement, and how what that is, and how it's done. And what you see here is direct, that sort of engagement. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about your idea generation process? Sort of, it's wonderful to see sort of this one idea brought forth in a building, but I imagine there must be quite a back and forth getting there, whether it's confrontational or just comparative. But if, sort of within your own practice, and then also in relation to the client or community like you were just mentioning.
Right. Well, for us, we have charrettes in the office, and so ideas are brought to the table, and people, the young people, the oldest people in the office, everyone can look and give feedback. That's not to say it's a total democracy. We don't vote. There's still leadership that's required, but usually the strong ideas have a way of floating to the top and becoming obvious. Especially as you present and talk about the user engagement. And so, it starts with that thought I'm talking about. There's someone, it does come down to the individual, that there's a thought by me, by this person, by that person. We come with those ideas and start discussing them and sharing them. And there's action, there's models, and over time, choices are made, usually by the leadership of the firm, the lead designers, myself, and others. Who can put an experienced perspective and historical perspective on these choices, not arbitrary. And we think that a strong idea is much easier to develop an excellent building if everyone understands the idea and is clear and is powerful. And so that's how it's done in our office. And we bring ideas to the stakeholders, not all of them. I think there's a danger come with every notion that you ever considered in architecture in the room or practicing. I can tell you, the architect picked the worst, meaning the client may pick the worst one, and then you have to talk them out of it. So you have to be careful not to show necessarily every tunnel that you went down and investigating things, but you bring the strongest, and there's some input. We're architects and we're trained to do this. There is a prerogative there that we need to maintain, and I think most clients understand. Is that it? Harry?
I decided not to ask, but
Okay, no, go ahead.
I had two questions running around in my mind. One is for you to talk a little bit about the nature of collaboration and the aspects of collaboration that make successful extension. But then the other is more formal. It had to do with the creation of a universal interior space and how that thematically goes through so many of the projects. I was thinking specifically of the New Architecture School at the University of Morgan State and how successful a space that becomes. And maybe you might want to say something about the role of that space in the organization.
Gary has noted that many of our projects, some of which you haven't seen. I didn't show everything. I thought it would be boring to go from start to finish and show 20 projects. Our website has other buildings, and one Gary's mentioning is the New Architecture building at Morgan State. And there's a central space. There's been one in this building. And there's a theme for us, and we believe that those semi-public spaces, depending on the use, are important areas for interaction and sharing. And there have to be spaces where people can informally gather and talk and interact with each other. And if you don't go with the architecture, it's more difficult to happen just by chance. And so we want to create interesting, vibrant spaces people can be in. And guess what? They come there and they interact and share ideas, whether it's ideas about architecture, whether it's ideas about molecular biology, or ideas about law, practice of law. These spaces that are communal, if they're lovely, if they're beautiful, if they're designed in a way that is sensitive and powerful, people will use them and interact there.
Phil, I want to thank you for what's been a really great ending to today. And just wanted to sort of follow on an observation that I had while we were presenting, particularly the Mies building, the Martin Luther King offering. Is that, Mies was the great master of the open plan, but he was pretty boring when it came to section. Mies was that, and that's about it. And I think one of the great one of the things that ought to be revealing for the students is that what you brought to the Mies, what you proposed to bring to the Mies Library, should the powers that be smart enough to embrace that, is that you brought section to it. And it's really one of the characteristics, I think, of all of your projects, and perhaps goes back to this issue of community. Perhaps, for my money, the buildings that I've been in, that you've been involved in, all have a special quality of light that gets introduced into them. I'm thinking that that's probably what we're going to see when the museum opens its doors on the mall, with this incredible quality of light, which at the end of the day has a lot to do with studying the sections. While the plan may be the generator, the section is an incredibly important thing to think about. And I think that's one of the things that you guys have brought great attention to, and it's quite beautifully done. So I want to thank you for sharing with us your work today, and I'm excited about seeing your interaction with our colleagues in Architecture 600, our student and faculty college and colleagues in Architecture 600, 611 over the course of the semester. Thank you.